The gunshot echoed across the windswept plains as Prudence Ramirez pulled her tattered shawl tighter around her trembling shoulders, knowing she'd never make it to safety before nightfall. At 19, she had already lost everything: her parents to cholera, her home to debt collectors, and now her last hope of sanctuary as the stagecoach abandoned her after the driver discovered she couldn't pay the full fare to Santa Fe. The year was 1876, and the unforgiving New Mexico Territory cared little for orphaned girls with empty pockets and desperate dreams. The October chill bit through her thin dress as the sun dipped below the distant mountains. Prudence clutched her small bundle of possessions, a worn photograph of her parents, a silver hairbrush that had belonged to her mother, and the last letter from her uncle inviting her to come live with him. The letter that had given her hope, until she'd arrived in the small town of Socorro, only to learn he had passed away just weeks before. Darkness settled over the land as Prudence searched for shelter. Finding none, she eventually collapsed beneath a lone cottonwood tree, its few remaining leaves offering meager protection from the increasingly cold night air. She placed her bundle beneath her head and curled into herself, trying to conserve what little warmth remained in her body. "I will survive this," she whispered, though her voice cracked with uncertainty. "I have to." Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the howl of coyotes and the persistent gnawing of hunger in her stomach. The ground beneath her was hard and uneven, rocks digging into her side no matter how she positioned herself. By morning, dew had soaked through her clothing, and her limbs ached with cold. The sound of hoofbeats roused her from her miserable half-sleep. Prudence raised her head, squinting against the harsh morning sunlight. A lone rider approached, his silhouette growing larger against the vast expanse of prairie and sky. Isaac Jensen had been tracking a small herd of wild mustangs for 3 days. At 26, he was already known throughout the territory as one of the finest horse trainers in the West. His ranch, modest but growing, lay a half-day's ride north. The tall cowboy pulled his chestnut stallion to a halt when he spotted what looked like a bundle of rags beneath the cottonwood tree. Only when the bundle moved did he realize it was a person. "Hello there," he called out, keeping a cautious distance. Times were uncertain, and not everyone encountered on the open range had honorable intentions. Prudence tried to stand but found her legs too weak and stiff. "Please," she managed, her voice barely audible. "I need help." Isaac dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He approached slowly, his weathered hand resting near the Colt revolver on his hip, a precaution more than a threat. When he was close enough to see that the stranger was a young woman, barely more than a girl, his posture relaxed. "Madam, are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling beside her. His eyes, the color of a summer sky, assessed her condition. "No, just hungry and cold." Prudence attempted dignity despite her circumstances. "The stagecoach left me. I had nowhere to go." Isaac nodded, understanding immediately. He'd seen it before: people abandoned in the middle of nowhere when their money ran out or when trouble found them. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning, a biscuit and some jerky." Without another word, Isaac retrieved his canteen and a small pouch of dried beef and hardtack from his saddlebag. He handed them to her, then stepped back to give her space. Prudence ate slowly, though her hunger demanded she devour everything at once. The water was warm but soothed her parched throat. "Thank you, Mr. Jensen, Isaac Jensen." He removed his hat, revealing sun-lightened streaks in his otherwise dark brown hair. "And you are Prudence Ramirez." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger, but something in his steady gaze inspired trust. "My parents died 6 months ago in Texas. I was coming to live with my uncle near Socorro, but he's gone too." Isaac listened without interruption, the wind ruffling his hair. When she finished, he asked simply, "Do you have any other family, anyone expecting you?" Prudence shook her head. "No one, nowhere." The cowboy considered this information, glancing at the horizon as if reading the weather there. "There's a storm coming, likely to hit by nightfall." He made his decision quickly, guided by the principles his father had instilled in him: never leave someone in need if you can help them. Miss Ramirez, I can't leave you here. My ranch is about 5 hours' ride north. I can take you there, get you properly fed and warmed up. Then we can figure out what's next. Prudence weighed her options, which were admittedly few. This man seemed decent, and the alternative was to remain alone, possibly die from exposure or worse. I would be grateful, Mr. Jensen. Isaac nodded once, then returned to his horse. He adjusted the saddle and came back to where Prudence was attempting again to stand. This time he offered his hand and she took it, her fingers icy against his calloused palm. Can you walk to the horse? He asked. She took a tentative step and winced. My legs are numb, but I can try. Isaac assessed the situation, then made a decision. Permission to carry you, Miss Ramirez? Prudence felt a flush rise to her cheeks despite her exhaustion. If you must. With gentle efficiency, Isaac lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he frowned at how fragile she felt. He carried her to his stallion, Thunderbolt, who remained steady as his master approached. I'm going to lift you onto my horse now, Isaac said. Then I'll mount behind you. Before she could respond, he raised her up, settling her sideways on the saddle. He gathered her small bundle of possessions, attached it to his saddlebag, then swung up behind her in one practiced motion. His arms formed a protective circle around her as he took the reins. Lean back if you need to, he said, his voice close to her ear. I won't let you fall. Prudence stiffened initially at the unfamiliar closeness. But as they began to move, the rhythmic gait of the horse and the solid presence of the cowboy behind her provided an unexpected comfort. Despite her best efforts to remain alert, the warmth of his body and the security of his arms soon lulled her into a deep sleep. Isaac felt the exact moment when she surrendered to exhaustion, her body becoming heavier against his chest. He adjusted his hold to support her more securely and continued riding, his thoughts turning to what awaited them at the ranch. His foreman, Manuel, and the cook, Mrs. Tildy, would have questions, but those could wait. For now, getting this young woman to safety was all that mattered. The journey took longer than expected, as Isaac kept the pace gentle for Prudence's sake. By mid-afternoon, the first buildings of the Jensen Ranch came into view, a modest main house built of timber and adobe, a large barn, bunkhouse, and several corrals where horses of various colors grazed or exercised. As they approached, a weathered man in his 50s emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. Manuel Ortega had worked for Isaac's father and stayed on when the son inherited the ranch 2 years prior. He watched curiously as his employer rode in with an unexpected passenger. Manuel, Isaac called out as they reached the central yard, we have a guest who needs care. Prudence stirred at the sound of his voice, blinking in confusion at her surroundings. We're here, Isaac told her gently. This is my ranch. Manuel approached, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. Senor Jensen, what have you found now, Miss Prudence Ramirez? Isaac replied, dismounting carefully before reaching up to help Prudence down. She was abandoned by a stagecoach. I found her beneath a cottonwood about 5 hours south. Prudence swayed slightly as her feet touched the ground, and Isaac steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Mrs. Tildy, Manuel called toward the house, prepare a room and a hot bath. A plump woman with gray hair appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of Prudence, taking in her disheveled appearance and obvious exhaustion. Merciful heavens, she exclaimed, hurrying down the steps. You poor child, come inside immediately. Prudence found herself ushered into the warmth of the ranch house, Mrs. Tildy's arm firmly around her shoulders. The housekeeper's stream of chatter washed over her as they climbed the stairs to a guest bedroom where a fire already blazed in the small hearth. A hot bath first, Mrs. Tildy declared, then clean clothes and a proper meal. You're nothing but skin and bones, child. Prudence, overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances, could only nod gratefully. Downstairs, Isaac explained what little he knew of Prudence's situation to Manuel as they unsaddled Thunderbolt. "What will you do with her?" the foreman asked. Isaac ran a hand through his hair, considering. "Get her well first, then help her find work somewhere safe, perhaps in Santa Fe." Manuel gave him a knowing look. "If you say so, Jeef." The bath was heaven. Prudence sank into the steaming water, feeling months of travel and worry begin to dissolve. Mrs. Tildy had provided soap that smelled of lavender and clean towels softer than anything Prudence had touched in recent memory. By the time she emerged, wrapped in a borrowed nightgown and robe that were both too large for her frame, she felt almost human again. Mrs. Tildy returned with a tray laden with chicken soup, fresh bread, and apple preserves. "Eat slowly, dear," she advised. "Your stomach needs time to remember its purpose." Prudence obeyed, savoring each spoonful of the rich broth. "Thank you for your kindness," she said when she'd finished half the bowl. "I don't know how I'll repay Mr. Jensen and you." "Nonsense," Mrs. Tildy replied, patting her hand. "That boy was raised right. He couldn't have left you out there any more than he could stop breathing." She straightened the bed covers. "Now finish what you can and get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Prudence intended to stay awake until Isaac came to discuss her situation, but the combination of warmth, food, and safety proved too powerful. She was asleep before the sun had fully set. Isaac checked on her after dinner, opening the door quietly when his knock received no answer. The sight of her sleeping peacefully, her dark hair spread across the pillow, and her face finally relaxed, stirred something unexpected within him. He closed the door silently and retreated to his study, where he spent the evening updating his breeding records, but finding his thoughts repeatedly drifting to the mysterious young woman under his roof. The next morning, Prudence woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, she lay still, absorbing the comfort of the feather mattress and warm quilts. The events of the previous day came back to her gradually, and with them, an awareness of her precarious position. She was entirely dependent on the goodwill of a man she had just met. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Tildy's entrance. The housekeeper carried another tray and a bundle of clothing. "Good morning, Miss Ramirez. I've brought breakfast and some things that might fit you. They belonged to Mr. Jensen's sister when she visited last summer. She's a bit taller than you, but we can make adjustments." Prudence accepted the simple blue dress, undergarments, and shawl with gratitude. "Is Mr. Jensen's sister here now?" she asked, hoping to meet another woman near her age. "Oh no, dear. Rebecca lives in Denver with her husband. She only visits once or twice a year." Mrs. Tildy set down the tray. "Mr. Jensen asked me to tell you he'll be in his study when you're ready to talk. No rush." After breakfast and dressing, Prudence made her way downstairs, following Mrs. Tildy's directions to the study. She knocked tentatively on the solid oak door. "Come in," called a deep voice. Isaac stood as she entered, setting aside the leather-bound ledger he'd been reviewing. In the daylight, Prudence had a clearer impression of him, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face tanned by sun and wind. His eyes were kind, with smile lines at the corners despite his relative youth. "Miss Ramirez," he greeted her, "you look much better today." "Thanks to your hospitality, Mr. Jensen." She remained near the door, uncertain of protocol. "Please sit." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Are you feeling stronger?" Prudence sat, arranging her borrowed dress modestly. "Yes, thank you. Mrs. Tildy has been very kind." Isaac smiled. "She enjoys having someone to fuss over besides Manuel and me." He leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "Miss Ramirez, I want to help you get back on your feet. Can you tell me more about your situation, your skills? What you had planned after reaching your uncle?" Prudence clasped her hands in her lap, considering how to explain. "My father was a schoolteacher in Galveston. I assisted him sometimes and received a proper education. I can read, write, do arithmetic. I know some Latin and French." She paused. "After my parents died of cholera, the bank took our home for debts. I worked briefly as a shop girl, but the wages barely covered my room at the boarding house." Isaac listened attentively as she continued. My uncle Enrique was my mother's brother. He wrote that he had a small ranch near Socorro and needed help with accounts and correspondence. It seemed ideal. Her voice faltered. When I arrived, his neighbor told me he had died of a heart ailment 3 weeks earlier. The ranch had already been sold to cover his debts. And you had spent everything to get there, Isaac concluded. Prudence nodded. The stagecoach driver said I could ride as far as my money would take me. When it ran out, she shrugged, the gesture conveying all that had followed. Isaac considered this information. An educated woman with no family connections had limited options in the territories. The nearest town with opportunities for someone of your background would be Santa Fe. I have connections there, people who might help you find suitable employment. That's very generous, Prudence replied, relief evident in her voice. I would be grateful for any assistance. In the meantime, Isaac continued, you're welcome to stay here and recover your strength. It's no trouble. I couldn't impose without offering something in return, Prudence insisted. Perhaps I could help Mrs. Tildy or assist with your accounts. She gestured toward the ledger on his desk. Isaac considered this. His record-keeping had indeed fallen behind since spring roundup. If you truly wish to help, I wouldn't object to assistance with the books, but only when you're fully recovered. Prudence smiled for the first time since he'd met her, a genuine expression that transformed her face from merely pretty to striking. Thank you, Mr. Jensen. I appreciate the opportunity to be useful. Something shifted in the air between them, a moment of connection that surprised them both. Isaac cleared his throat. Well then, perhaps tomorrow you can review the system I use. For today, continue resting. The next week established a comfortable routine. Each morning after breakfast, Prudence would join Isaac in his study for several hours, organizing records of cattle sales, horse breeding, and ranch expenses. Her methodical approach and quick understanding impressed him, while she found satisfaction in bringing order to the scattered documentation of the ranch's operations. In the afternoons, Prudence often helped Mrs. Tildy with household tasks or walked the grounds, gradually regaining her strength. The fresh air and regular meals brought color to her cheeks and a brightness to her eyes that hadn't been there when Isaac found her. For his part, Isaac found himself increasingly looking forward to their morning sessions. Prudence's intelligence and quiet determination reminded him of his mother, a woman who had helped build the ranch alongside his father through sheer force of will. Yet there was something distinctly different about his feelings toward Prudence, something that made him more aware of how he spoke, how he dressed, how he presented himself. One afternoon, 10 days after her arrival, Isaac invited Prudence to accompany him to the corral where he was working with a young Mustang mare. I thought you might enjoy seeing what the ranch is actually about, beyond the numbers in the ledgers, he explained as they walked toward the training pen. Prudence willingly followed, curious about this aspect of ranch life. I've always admired horses, but my experience is limited to carriage rides in Galveston, she admitted. Isaac smiled. Then you're in for a treat. This filly is something special. They reached the corral where a beautiful Palomino mare paced nervously, her golden coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Manuel stood nearby, holding a rope and speaking softly in Spanish to the skittish animal. This is Estrella, Isaac said. I caught her with the wild herd last week. She's intelligent but frightened. Today we're continuing to build trust. Prudence watched in fascination as Isaac entered the corral. His entire demeanor changed, becoming calmer, more centered. He took the rope from Manuel and approached the mare with slow, deliberate movements, speaking in a low, steady voice. Most trainers break a horse's spirit to make it obedient, he explained to Prudence without taking his eyes off Estrella. I prefer to build a partnership. It takes longer but creates a better horse and rider relationship. For the next hour, Prudence observed as Isaac worked with Estrella, never forcing, always inviting. By the end, the mare was cautiously accepting his touch, even allowing him to place a light blanket on her back. "That was remarkable," Prudence said when he finally exited the corral. "She trusts you." Isaac wiped sweat from his brow with his sleeve. "She's beginning to. Trust takes time." Their eyes met, and Prudence felt a curious flutter in her chest at the double meaning that seemed to hover in his words. She looked away first, suddenly conscious of how close they were standing. "Would you like to learn to ride?" Isaac asked. "Not on Estrella, she's not ready, but I have several gentle horses that would be suitable for a beginner." Prudence hesitated. "I'm not sure I would be any good at it." "Nonsense. You have good balance and patience. I've seen it in how you approach problems with the accounts. Those are valuable qualities for riding." His eyes held a challenge. "Unless you're afraid." "I am not afraid," Prudence replied with a hint of indignation that made Isaac grin. "Very well, Mr. Jensen, I accept your offer." The next day, after their morning work, Isaac brought a docile bay gelding named Copper to the smaller training corral. He showed Prudence how to approach the horse, how to offer an apple with a flat palm, how to stroke his neck and speak soothingly. "Now for mounting," Isaac said once she seemed comfortable with the animal. He positioned a mounting block beside Copper. "Step up, take the reins in your left hand, grab the saddle horn and swing your right leg over." Prudence attempted to follow his instructions but hesitated at the critical moment. Isaac stepped closer. "May I assist you?" At her nod, he placed his hands at her waist and lifted her effortlessly onto the saddle. The sensation of his strong hands supporting her sent a rush of warmth through her body that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "Thank you," she managed, adjusting her skirts as best she could while seated astride. The position felt strange but not uncomfortable. "Keep your back straight, heels down, and hold the reins gently," Isaac instructed, stepping back to assess her posture. "Perfect. Now, to move forward, squeeze slightly with your legs." The lesson continued for nearly an hour, with Isaac leading Copper around the corral while Prudence grew accustomed to the movement and basic commands. By the end, she was smiling broadly despite her sore muscles. "You're a natural," Isaac complimented her as he helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "I had an excellent teacher," she replied, looking up at him. Something unspoken passed between them, a current of awareness neither was quite ready to acknowledge. The riding lessons became a daily event, and Prudence's skill improved rapidly. Within 2 weeks, she was confident enough to ride beyond the corral, accompanying Isaac on short excursions around the ranch property. These rides provided opportunities for conversation beyond the business of the ranch, allowing them to share stories of their childhoods, their hopes, their views on everything from literature to politics. Isaac learned that Prudence had a passion for poetry, particularly Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and could recite entire passages from memory. She discovered his secret enjoyment of Shakespeare, plays he had read by lamplight during long winter evenings. During one such ride, they stopped to rest beneath a stand of cottonwoods beside a small creek. The November air was crisp but not unpleasant, and the sun created dappled patterns through the remaining leaves. "Tell me about your parents," Prudence requested as they sat on a fallen log, their horses grazing nearby. Isaac gazed at the flowing water, collecting his thoughts. "My father came west after the war, the Mexican War, that is. He was from Pennsylvania originally. He worked as a trapper, then a cavalry scout before settling here and starting the ranch. He was a hard man but fair." A smile touched his lips. "My mother softened his edges. She was the daughter of a Santa Fe merchant educated at a convent school. Everyone was surprised when she chose my father, but they built something good together." "When did they pass?" Prudence asked gently. "Mother 5 years ago, pneumonia. Father 2 years after that. The doctor called it heart failure, but I think he simply couldn't imagine life without her anymore." Isaac turned to her. "And yours?" Prudence twisted a blade of grass between her fingers. "My father taught at a small academy in Galveston. He loved knowledge for its own sake. My mother was his opposite, practical, focused on the world as it is rather than ideas, but they adored each other." Her voice grew softer. "The cholera came suddenly last spring. Father fell ill first, then mother as she nursed him. I was spared, though I don't know why." Without thinking, Isaac reached for her hand. "I'm sorry, Prudence." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it, combined with the warmth of his hand covering hers, made her breath catch. "Thank you, Isaac." They remained that way for several moments, connected by touch and shared understanding of loss. When they finally rode back to the ranch, something fundamental had shifted between them, though neither spoke of it. The following evening, Mrs. Tildy announced that she had prepared a special dinner to celebrate 1 month since Prudence's arrival. The table in the rarely used dining room was set with the good china, and candles cast a warm glow over the roast beef, potatoes, and fresh baked bread. Isaac, dressed in his Sunday best, stood as Prudence entered wearing a new dress Mrs. Tildy had helped her make from fabric ordered from Santa Fe. The deep green color complemented her auburn hair, which she had arranged in a simple but elegant style. "You look beautiful," Isaac said, the sincerity in his voice causing Prudence to blush. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." They ate by candlelight, the conversation flowing easily between them. When Mrs. Tildy brought in apple pie for dessert, she exchanged a knowing look with Manuel, who had joined them for the celebration. "To Miss Prudence," Isaac proposed a toast, raising his glass. "Who has brought efficiency to our accounts and brightness to our home." "To new beginnings," Prudence responded, meeting his gaze over the rim of her glass. After dinner, Isaac invited Prudence to join him on the porch, where they sat in comfortable rocking chairs watching the stars emerge in the vast New Mexico sky. The air held the promise of winter, and Prudence drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Cold?" Isaac asked, noticing the gesture. "A little." He disappeared into the house, returning with a thick woolen blanket that he draped carefully around her. As he leaned close, the scent of his shaving soap, sandalwood, and something distinctly him enveloped her. "Better?" he asked, his face mere inches from hers. "Yes," she whispered, suddenly very aware of his proximity. Isaac straightened, returning to his chair, but his eyes remained on her. "Prudence, there's something I need to discuss with you." Her heart quickened at his serious tone. "Yes. I received a letter from my contact in Santa Fe today. He says there's a position available at a girls' school there teaching literature and basic arithmetic. The pay is modest, but includes room and board. He believes you would be well suited for it based on what I've told him of your education." Prudence absorbed this information, feeling both grateful for the opportunity and strangely disappointed. "That's wonderful news. When would they need an answer?" "By the end of the month. If you accept, you could start after the new year." Isaac's voice was carefully neutral. "Of course, there's no rush for you to leave here. The position will be held if you're interested." Prudence nodded slowly. "It's very kind of you to arrange this. I should consider it carefully." "Of course." Isaac stood abruptly. "It's getting late. I should check on the new foal before turning in." He left her there, wrapped in the blanket that smelled of him, staring at the stars and wondering why the prospect of leaving the ranch filled her with such sadness when just a month ago, all she had wanted was security and independence. The next morning, their usual routine felt strained. Isaac was polite but distant as they worked on the accounts, and Prudence found herself making uncharacteristic errors that required correction. "I'm sorry," she said after the third mistake. "I seem distracted today." Isaac closed the ledger. "Perhaps we should continue tomorrow. The weather's fine. Why don't you take Copper for a ride? It might clear your head." Prudence accepted the suggestion gratefully. She had grown confident enough to ride alone on the established trails near the ranch, and the prospect of solitude appealed to her confused emotions. She saddled Copper herself, having learned this skill from Manuel, and set out toward her favorite spot by the creek. The rhythm of the horse's gait and the beauty of the landscape gradually soothed her troubled thoughts. At the creek, she dismounted and secured Copper to a low branch before sitting on the now familiar log. The water bubbled over stones, creating a melody that invited contemplation. A teaching position would provide exactly what she had sought when leaving Texas Independence: purpose, a chance to use her education. Yet the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Isaac, created an ache in her chest that couldn't be ignored. She had fallen in love with him. The realization wasn't shocking. Part of her had known for weeks. What surprised her was the depth of the feeling, how thoroughly he had become essential to her happiness. But did he feel the same? His actions suggested care, perhaps even attraction, but he had also arranged for her to leave. If he wanted her to stay, surely he would have said so. Prudence was so absorbed in these thoughts that she didn't hear the approach of another rider until Thunderbolt nickered a greeting to Copper. She turned to see Isaac dismounting, his expression unreadable. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, securing his horse beside hers. "Mrs. Tildy mentioned you'd gone riding and he hesitated. I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I'm fine," Prudence assured him, making room on the log, "just thinking." Isaac sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. "About Santa Fe?" "Yes," she watched a leaf floating downstream. "It's a generous opportunity, but not what you want." His perception startled her. Prudence gathered her courage. "I don't know what I want anymore." A month ago, such a position would have seemed like a miracle. She turned to face him. "Now I find myself reluctant to leave the ranch, to leave—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Isaac's eyes searched hers. "To leave what, Prudence?" "You," she admitted softly. "I've come to care for you, Isaac, more than I should, perhaps." The confession hung between them, fragile and momentous. Isaac's expression transformed, relief and joy replacing uncertainty. "I've been a fool," he said, moving closer. "I arranged that position because I thought it was what you wanted: independence, a fresh start. All the while hoping you would choose to stay." Prudence's heart raced. "You want me to stay, more than anything?" He took her hands in his. "Prudence, when I found you beneath that cottonwood tree, I thought I was rescuing a stranger in need. I didn't realize I was finding the person who would change everything for me." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I love you, Prudence Ramirez. These past weeks have shown me what my life could be with you in it: brighter, more meaningful, complete." Tears welled in Prudence's eyes. "I love you too, Isaac. I never expected to find a home here, but that's what this place has become to me, because of you." Isaac released her hands only to cup her face gently between his palms. "Then stay. Not as my accountant or as a guest, but as my partner, my wife, if you'll have me." Prudence's breath caught. "Are you certain? We've known each other such a short time." "I've never been more certain of anything," Isaac assured her. "My parents knew within 2 weeks that they were meant for each other, and they had 40 years of happiness. I don't want to waste a day that could be spent loving you." His words melted the last of her hesitation. "Then yes, Isaac Jensen, I will stay and be your wife." The kiss that followed was tender at first, a sealing of promises, then deepened with the release of feelings both had held in check for weeks. When they finally parted, both were smiling, their futures reimagined in an instant. They rode back to the ranch side by side, occasionally reaching across the space between their horses to touch hands, as if needing constant reassurance of the other's presence. The setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, transforming the familiar terrain into something magical. Mrs. Tildy took one look at their faces as they entered the kitchen and clapped her hands in delight. "Well, it's about time. Manuel, you owe me $1, the foreman grumbled good-naturedly as he extracted a coin from his pocket. "Couldn't you have waited another week, Jeef?" Isaac laughed, his arm around Prudence's waist. "Sorry to disappoint you, old friend, but when you know, you know." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the ranch house parlor with a judge from Socorro officiating. Mrs. Tildy had transformed the room with evergreen boughs and ribbons, and Manuel had surprised everyone by revealing a talent for violin, providing music for the small celebration. Prudence wore a simple white dress made from fabric Isaac had sent a ranch hand to purchase in Santa Fe, along with a ring that had belonged to his mother. Her hair was adorned with winter berries and small white flowers Mrs. Tildy had somehow coaxed to bloom in her kitchen garden. As they exchanged vows before the assembled ranch hands and a few neighbors, Prudence thought of how different her life had become in just 2 months. From sleeping on the hard ground with no hope or future to standing beside the man she loved, promising forever. After the ceremony and the feast that followed, Isaac led his bride to the master bedroom, now prepared for both of them with fresh linens and candles casting a warm glow over the polished furniture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Jensen," he said softly, closing the door behind them. "It still seems like a dream," Prudence admitted, turning in a slow circle to take in the room. "2 months ago I had nothing, now I have everything." Isaac drew her into his arms. "We have everything," he corrected gently. "Together." Their life together unfolded with the seasons. Prudence brought order and beauty to the ranch house while continuing to manage the accounts with growing expertise. Isaac's horse breeding program flourished under their joint management, with Prudence's organizational skills complementing his natural talent with the animals. By the following autumn, they welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor after Isaac's mother. 2 years later, a son joined the family, Michael, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's curious nature. On the 5th anniversary of the day, Isaac found Prudence beneath the cottonwood tree. They rode together to that same spot by the creek. The trees were larger now, the log where they had sat replaced by a small bench Isaac had built specifically for this place. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't found me that day?" Prudence asked as they sat side by side, watching their children play nearby under Mrs. Tildy's watchful eye. Isaac took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band he had placed there 5 years earlier. "Sometimes. But then I remember what my father always said about life, that the most important moments often look like chance but are actually destiny." Prudence leaned against his shoulder, contentment warming her despite the autumn chill. "Finding you was my destiny then." "The best one I could have imagined." "No," Isaac corrected gently, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Finding each other was our destiny, and we've only just begun." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the land they both loved, Prudence reflected on the journey that had brought her here from orphaned and alone to beloved wife, mother, and partner. The ground she had once slept on in desperation had become the foundation for a life richer than any she could have dreamed. Isaac stood and offered his hand. "Time to go home, love." Prudence placed her hand in his, rising to stand beside him. "I am home," she said simply, "wherever you are."